Hello there. My name is Bittencourt. I'm the author of the blog Momergil, and I'm here to talk to you about my latest article, True Defeaters Against Left-Wing Ideology. The purpose of this video is to talk about it in lighter terms, in popular language. So I'm not gonna say here everything I wrote in that article in every detail. For those interested, I just recommend actually reading it. And the idea here is to more or less give you an idea of what I propose in that material. So, what's my thesis? What I suggest in my article? Well, as the title suggests, I'm trying to propose two arguments, two lines of reasoning for why I think the left-wing ideology is false, is incorrect. So we shouldn't be left. Now, the idea here is that, of course, we can ask ourselves, but how can we know that? How can we know if the left is the correct or incorrect political ideology? Well, I suggest that we can look at it as what I call a package of ideas. It's when you have one or more claims put together in some coherent way. And those claims can be descriptive, they can tell about how the world is, or they can be prescriptive. They can suggest how things should be, what we should do. And the point here is if someone somehow can demonstrate that a certain package of ideas contains a descriptive claim that is false, so it tells how the world is, but it's not like that, or it makes a proposal that is somehow inadequate, and in that case, you have invalidated that package of ideas. I give an example about theologies. Theologies of religions can count as packages of ideas. So, for example, the Christian theology affirms that God exists, that we are sinful. Well, let's suppose that someone were to demonstrate that God doesn't exist, that atheism, in some definition of atheism, is correct. Well, in that case, you will have invalidated the Christian religion. It will be demonstrated to be false. Now, of course, I make a distinction there between essential and non-essential ideas of a package. Sometimes a package of ideas might affirm something traditionally, but it's not really that important to the view. So you can refute it, but that doesn't refute the package. In Christian theology, for example, I think most theologians will agree that the doctrine of biblical inerrancy will be an example. If you can prove that the Bible is full of crap, let's say, that doesn't automatically prove Christianity to be false. I mean, it's a very traditional belief, but it's not essential to the Christian faith to believe in biblical inerrancy. God, on the other hand, is essential. If you can demonstrate that God doesn't exist, you have effectively demonstrated Christianity to be false. So, what about this particular package of ideas we call left-wing ideology? What is that it proposes? Well, it seems essential to the left ideology, what we may call the defense of equality, egalitarianism. So basically, the left ideology claims that we look at the world and we find it to be very unequal, full of inequalities. And that seems pretty right. But then you move on to say that that's actually bad, that somehow these inequalities in the world are bad, political inequalities, economic inequalities, and so forth. And then he moves on to propose that what we should have is a more equal, a more egalitarian world. And if only we had such more equal world, the world would be better. So we need to move in that direction. We have to implement policies, we have to make the social and structural changes in order to have a more equal world, and that world will be a better one. So that seems to be a pretty common and essential claim, actually, of the left ideology. But the question is, well, what if we can actually affirm that it's actually false? And so I propose that this claim is actually false. It's false to say that if only the world were more equal, therefore it will be better. It is false to say that equality or more equality implies in a better or good state, a positive qualitative state. And I move on to give some examples. Think about one of the examples I mentioned. Imagine that you have a society composed of 100 people. 50 of them are rich, wealthy, so they have a pretty good life. 50 of them are poor, miserable, almost starving to death. So we have a very unequal society. 50 very well, 50 screwed. But then suppose that a change is made, and now 100 of them, everybody, is poor. Well, this second situation is egalitarian. Everybody is, economically speaking, equal. And yet, is it good? Well, of course not. Not only it's bad, it's even worse than before. In the previous situation, at least 50 were well, 50 were bad, but at least 50 were well, and now everybody is bad. So we have increased equality, and yet the reality is not better. It actually is bad and worse. In other words, it is false to say that equality or more equality implies in a positive qualitative state, either in relative terms or in absolute terms. But that means that an essential point of left-wing ideology is false, because that's precisely what left-wing ideology affirms to us, that a more equal world would be a better one. That doesn't seem to be a true statement. So, that's my first argument in that article. But that's not the only one. I propose a second defeater as well. And the observation here is that this claim is actually what we might call the fallacy of equality. I proposed that in my first article some years ago. This inference of a positive qualitative state from equality is logically fallacious. We can call it this, an informal fallacy, the fallacy of equality. And the point is that left ideology is actually affirming this logically unsound reasoning. Well, here's the point. If a certain package of ideas affirms a logical fallacy, that is not adequately, reasonably believable. Why? Because we should rationally reject fallacious reasonings, fallacious arguments. Whenever we face an argument that is fallacious for some reason, in some fallacious way, we are supposed to reject that argument. Think about appeal to nature, for example. If it's natural, therefore it's good. Well, that's kind of a logical fallacy on its own. And let's suppose someone will make that claim. Well, then you should reject that claim. It's very common, in fact, for that to happen. Sometimes, for example, people commit in their philosophical work the genetic fallacy. And so what the philosophers do is that they point out, look, your argument is fallacious. It commits a genetic fallacy. And that's it. Your argument is dead. You lost. You made a piece of bad philosophy. But here's the trick. Here's the point. The left-wing ideology affirms essentially this invalid reasoning, a fallacy. So it seems that you cannot disassociate one with the other, from the other, which means that if you affirm left-wing ideology, we are going to be affirming a fallacious reasoning. But we are not supposed to do that. We are supposed to reject fallacious reasoning. That would imply that we are supposed to reject the left-wing ideology. So I give the following example. Imagine that a certain company wants to persuade people to buy their products. And these products are of, let's say, a natural kind. Let's suppose that this company will say, you should buy your products because they are natural and that means they are good. Well, that would be fallacious arguments, appeal to nature. So you should reject this argument. Of course, it's just an argument. You can still buy the products of this company for other reasons, just not this reason, because this one would be bad. But what if this company makes difference? What if its campaign people, its ads people, decides to create a new ideology? And this ideology preaches that we should love one another, that we should love our family, and that we should buy natural products because they are good for being natural. Well, in that case, this new hypothetical ideology is affirming, is making a statement which is itself an affirmation of a logically unsound reasoning. Well, in that case, if you accept the ideology, this hypothetical ideology, you are going to be accepting the fallacious reasoning. But once again, we're not supposed to do that. You have to reject appeal to nature. But that implies rejecting this hypothetical ideology. In the same way, we are supposed to reject the informal fallacy of equality. But that implies rejecting left-wing ideology, which affirms this fallacy. So, the conclusion is that this package of ideas, called the left-wing ideology, is inadequate, is a false ideology, and therefore people shouldn't be left. And this is, of course, one of the reasons why I myself am not a left-wing inclined. So this is the summary of my article. Of course, I say a lot of things. I have 20 pages of articles. I have lots of notes and reference and so forth. So of course, if any of you listening to me by some reason think that maybe my argument is not very persuasive, I would suggest first actually reading the full article. And if you still think that it's not persuasive, if you still think that I have failed somehow in some premise or something, well, then don't hesitate and give me, of course, a feedback. I'll be very happy to have all your feedbacks. Okay? So that's my work. That's my latest article, True Defeaters Against Left Wing Ideology. And I hope you like it. I hope you would agree with me. And well, that's it for today. See you next time.